Alright people, the time has come. I have gone through every single one of the Child's Play films, given my review for all of them, and now it is time to rank the entire franchise. Now, it has come to my attention that Mr. Lee from Drum Dums thought that he had enough nerve to drop his ranking of the Chucky films on the same day, at the same exact hour, same exact minute as my ranking.
This means war.
For those that don't know Drum Dums, it's another horror channel you guys should check out. Very good friend of mine. We do Scream Stream over on his channel. We've done a couple of collabs on my channel as well as his, like the top 5 rundown of our favorite 5 horror sequels. Still probably the coolest video that I've ever done, at least in my opinion. Very cool guy. Highly recommend you go check out his channel. But with all that said, Lee, you are admittedly the casual Chucky fan, and you have the nerve to drop your ranking the same day as the true Chucky fan?
What are you, fucking nuts?
So this is what we're going to do, people. After you get done checking out my ranking of the Chucky franchise, go on over to Drum Dums and check out his so-called ranking of the Chucky franchise and put in my comment section as well as his comment section which ranking you agree with, if you agree with either one of them. Let's choose a winner. Battle to the death, baby. But with all that being said, let's talk about some Chucky movies. Some Child's Play, baby. We got 7 of these things to rank. It was such a fun franchise to revisit, which, let's be honest, I revisit these damn movies every year anyway. Might as well talk about them in front of a camera. Had a lot of fun reviewing these, and we're going to kick it off with number 7, The Shit Pile, Seed of Chucky. For those that haven't seen my review, spoiler alert, I hate the fuck out of this movie. This movie is one of the worst horror movies ever made. I can appreciate the few people out there that do like it for how zany and off the wall and comedic and strange it is, but all of the reasons you like it are the reasons that I fucking despise it. I think that it is the most ill-conceived, worst made, worst written Chucky movie that I could ever possibly fathom, and I hope that it remains that way. I hope nothing ever comes out that dethrones Seed of Chucky as the biggest shit pile in this franchise. You can check out my full review for all of the profanity-fueled thoughts I have on this movie. I don't like it at all. I think it's horrible. That is number 7. Number 6 is going to be a movie that I am quite infamous for my opinions on, and it's infamous as well how polar opposite me and Lee view this movie. So you're probably going to see this movie a lot higher on his ranking. I'll go ahead and warn you. And for some people that might make you love his ranking even more. Who knows? This movie is so polarizing with fans. I'm on the negative end though, and I do not like Cult of Chucky. That is my number 6. Such wasted potential for this movie. I was looking forward to this movie for so long because Curse brought it back from the depths of hell from Seed, and I thought they had nowhere to go from Up. They would learn their lessons from Seed, and at least in my opinion, they made a lot of the same mistakes as they made with Seed in Cult of Chucky. They had some really strange ideas. There was like 4 or 5 ideas for a good Chucky movie in here that they kind of mashed together and half-assed delivered on every single one of them. You got multiple Chuckies, which they decide not to explain in a very effective way, so it pisses off me because I'm a stickler for the lore of this franchise. You don't just tear up the rules and all of a sudden Chucky can do whatever he wants. You bring back Andy. You bring back Alex Vincent as Andy, which is a great idea for a Chucky sequel, but the dude is wasted in this movie. Not only is his acting terrible, which is bad enough, but if you'd have done something cool with this character, we could forgive bad acting for a familiar face from the franchise, but they do such stupid things with his character. All the way through to the end of the movie, his plan to get back at Chucky not only backfires completely, but it is moronic. From the time that he goes to confront Chucky in this insane asylum to the end of the movie, I was just sitting there like, you just made Andy the biggest dumbass you possibly could have. I digress. Fiona Dorff was great. The kills are pretty good. They're nice and gory. There's some good practical effects in this movie, which I also always appreciate practical over CGI, but there's also a lot of CGI shots in this movie that are pretty terrible. The direction by Don Mancini, to me, it seems like he's trying to go way too stylistic with this one. It thinks like he's trying to do too many things that he doesn't quite have the skill set for, in my opinion. And I'm just not a fan of Don Mancini directing these movies. You'll find that out whenever you see the entire ranking. But the writing in this movie was just the worst. The story, the dialogue especially, even Chucky's lines, to be honest with you. There was one scene where the 3 Chuckies were kind of conversing with each other that made me kind of giggle a little bit, but there was no seriously hilarious, iconic, awesome lines from Chucky, in my opinion, in this movie, and that's a bad thing. So I'm not going to rant on Cult of Chucky any longer. I got 2 videos where I rant on Cult of Chucky, but I'm not a fan of this sequel. I could still watch it and be entertained somewhat by it. Like if I'm marathoning the Chucky movies, I might skip Seed. I'm probably not going to skip Cult just because it's interesting enough with all the crazy shit in it, but not a good Chucky movie at all to me. That is number 6. Number 5 is going to be Curse of Chucky, the first controversial pick on this ranking because so many people put this movie in the top 2 that I have seen. People love this movie. And don't get me wrong, I like it. From here all the way to my number 1, these are all movies that I enjoy. These are movies that I would recommend. These are movies where the positives far outweigh the negatives to me, whereas the bottom 2, those are movies I'll give your thumbs down to and tell you to skip it or fuck this movie and all my other vernacular to tell you not to watch it. But with Curse of Chucky, it was interesting because it was a back to basics, back to its roots, horror-focused sequel. Came right after Seed of Chucky. It took the Chucky's franchise into VOD, which was a giant red flag to me. I thought that was going to kill this franchise. And much to my surprise, it was much of a kind of throwback to the first movie. And the tone of the first movie and the direction of the first movie as far as kind of a whodunit, and Chucky doesn't even really show up in full-on Chucky form until halfway through the runtime. So really interesting approach, and it ended up being the shot in the arm that this franchise needed after Seed of Chucky. I think that Brad Dourif was really good in this. Still, his lines aren't nearly as iconic as the movies above this, but they were still pretty good. Fiona Dourif is the best thing about this movie. Her addition to this franchise was great and a huge surprise to me because talking about red flags, when I see that Brad Dourif's daughter is getting included in this movie and I've never seen this girl act before, all I'm thinking is it's just kind of a favor to Brad Dourif. Yeah, I'll bring my daughter in since we can't really afford actors on VOD and she'll just play this part. And shame on me because she is great. She's the best part about this movie. She's definitely the best part of Cult of Chucky. I like the haunted house feel of this. It all takes place in this Hitchcockian house. There's some really interesting camera moves here and there, and some interesting little, like there's like a dinner scene when everything's real tense and it's moving around and showing everybody eating. You're trying to figure out who's getting poisoned. Some pretty interesting ideas in this movie. Overall, the main thing that holds this one back for me is not only Don Mancini's directing, because I don't think it's near as good as the movies above this list, and it still has some strangeness to it, but I feel like the reveal of Chucky takes too long to come. I feel like that the throwback to the first movie, the whodunit style, is good, but it should have been quickened to the first act, not the first half of the movie, so it's a little bit of an impatient watch for me. And I think that the acting in this movie is among the worst of the franchise. Probably, it's a little bit better than Cult, but once this thing hit VOD, you could tell the acting level was dropped quite a bit. So that's the main thing really, is the acting. And there's also some lore meddling in this that pisses me off, like whenever Chucky gets stabbed and feathers come out and he gets his head knocked off and it's just a plastic head. Like, again, it's Don Mancini just kind of throwing out shit that he doesn't really want to deal with in his own lore and his own writing. People can justify it however they want. For me personally, there's no justifying it. It's still jarring, it's still aggravating as hell. So I enjoy Curse of Chucky, but I enjoy much more the 4 above it, so that is why it is my number 5. Number 4 is a movie that most people put at the bottom of their list, or close to the bottom, and I've never understood why, and that's Child's Play 3. Now, this is a movie where, honestly, I've said it in my review, this is the first horror movie that I ever saw. So I do have a soft spot for this because of that. I do have some nostalgia for it. Maybe that makes me like it more than I should if I had watched this movie without that coming into it. I'll admit that fully, but I really enjoyed Child's Play 3. I think that it hits a lot of the positives that Child's Play 2 hit, which is most people's favorite or among their favorites. And I just think that the only flaw this movie had is that Child's Play 2 got there first. So whenever you look at this movie, it feels a little bit redundant, a little bit derivative because it's the same things you got in Child's Play 2. But for me, that's just more shit that I like. It's Chucky unhinged. It's a movie where Chucky's there from the beginning, giving one-liners, having iconic lines, killing people in really creative ways. It's a really fun movie. Really the only negatives with this movie for me is I don't think Justin Whalen was a very good replacement for Alex Vincent because the movie only takes place, or it was only made like a year after Child's Play 2, and I think the movie would have served better to just keep Alex Vincent and just put young Alex Vincent in this military setting, which is another positive. I like the change up of the military setting, but they decided to go older because they wanted Chucky to go after somebody else. Tyler's not the best actor or the smartest character in the world, so you don't really feel for him. He's really stupid. And there's a few small flaws with this movie that do hold it back for me. I understand why some people that aren't Chucky fanatics or, love 2 so much and then they immediately watch this one, they feel that it's really inferior and it's kind of a kick in the nuts, but I've never understood the hate for this movie. I think that it's a very, very good Child's Play movie. I think that it hits all the marks that you want for a Child's Play movie. It just got there late. Child's Play 2 got there first, and then Child's Play 3 came right after it, and it seems a little derivative. But to me, I love this sequel. I always have. I always will. That's why it's my number 4. And this has the coolest death of Chucky by far. Like, out of the entire franchise, this has the coolest death of Chucky, in my opinion. The little fan blades and everything, that's good shit. Number 3. I'm going to break the rules of everybody always putting the original as number 1. The original Child's Play is my number 3. For Tom Holland's directing, for Chris Sarandon, so many elements of this movie that has kind of that 80s classic slasher feel to it. Of course, the introduction of Charles Lee Ray and Chucky. The whole storyline of the whole whodunit. Is Chucky really alive? Is Alex Vincent, the little boy Andy, actually murdering these people? Is it somebody else and the kid just thinks it's the doll? There's really, really effective slasher mystery elements in this movie that, to me, it's honestly kind of an underrated slasher from the 80s. Not a whole lot of people talk about the first one very much. I enjoyed the first one a lot. The only thing that holds this back for me as far as not being at the top of my list and number 2 or number 1 is just the fact that they didn't really realize what they had with Chucky in this movie. You get Chucky in mostly the last act of the movie for the most part. I mean, you get to see Chucky in the second act here and there, but as far as full-on, unleashed, realized, on steroids Chucky that we get in some of the best sequels where they know that Chucky is the star of this movie and he's the reason why everybody's come to see it, they didn't realize that in this first movie. So really that's just the main thing that falls back for me. And some of the effects are a little bit dated. Not necessarily the animatronics, which are great, but like the effects where they have a little person walk around in Chucky clothes. I think that looks kind of rough when you watch it nowadays, but great animatronics, great voice acting by Brad Dourif. I mean, the creation of Chucky, the creation of one of my favorite characters of all time, the story between Andy's mom, you know, believing that Andy might be doing this, to finding out that the Chucky doll's alive and trying to save her son while trying to get Chris Sarandon, this detective, to believe her, but he won't, and just a lot of great storyline in this movie, and it's an iconic match. It's an iconic slasher from the 80s that nobody will ever take that away from it. So I love Child's Play. That's my number 3. Now, as far as my top 2, again, just like in my Nightmare on Elm Street ranking, I am at a total stalemate with 2 movies that I love unabashedly for very similar and very different reasons. Extremely difficult for me to pick a winner. But when I was rewatching these movies, you know, I had one, the one that I'm going to choose for my number 2 was originally as my number 1 for the longest time. And I changed my mind on it after I reviewed these movies and watched them again, because just something about revisiting my number 1 kind of sparked a change in me and just made me realize how much I love that movie. And I had to give it just a slight edge over my number 2, which my number 2 is Bride of Chucky. Now, I love the hell out of Bride of Chucky. I sing the praises of Bride of Chucky. I will defend it because there's people out there that hate this movie. They put it right next to Seed as the worst of this franchise. I'll never understand that. Bride of Chucky to me is like the perfect sequel whenever a franchise is starting to get stale. They introduced Tiffany with Jennifer Tilly, where Jennifer Tilly is just nailing this role. She nails the human aspect of Tiffany. She nails the voice acting aspect of Tiffany. The movie's got a lot of balls because it actually asks you to spend more time and investment with Tiffany than Chucky himself. They give Tiffany more of the good lines. They give Tiffany all the good kills. And a lot of the storyline focuses around her, and she is just the perfect counterpoint to Chucky. Now, after you have 3 movies of Chucky looking for Andy Barclay, they decided to inject some new life into this by going a little bit more comedic, but this is still a very dark horror movie with a lot of comedic elements. It's not full-on stupid comedy like Seed of Chucky was. No matter how many people argue that this movie does that, it does not. They inject some more comedy into it. They have a lot more fun with the concept. They go a little bit more zany with it as far as Chucky having a bride and being a road movie where you're following Chucky and Tiffany. And it's not focused on Chucky just chasing his arch nemesis yet again. To me, that was the most refreshing thing about this movie, the best thing they could do for this franchise to give it some new life, some new blood. There's some awesome kills. Some of the best, if not the best, Chucky one-liners you're going to find are in Bride of Chucky. I love the scarred look of Chucky. That's my favorite look of the entire franchise, is his look in Bride of Chucky. When he's all stitched up and scarred, he looks badass, he looks scary. I love it. Ronnie Yu is just a fun horror director. This is the guy that directed Freddy vs. Jason, which again, I know people don't like that movie, but there's a ton of people that do, and I'm one of them. I love Freddy vs. Jason, but I think Bride of Chucky is even better. It's even more fun. It's got a badass soundtrack to it, and everything about this movie is so awesome to me. I rewatch it constantly. I probably rewatch this one the most, honestly, because it's the most fun for me to digest and just put in and have a good time with. The only thing that disappoints me about it, which it's not a negative on this movie at all, the only thing it's hard to rewatch this movie for is what could have come. What should have come after Bride of Chucky and we got Seed of Chucky. It's just, every time I get to that final scene and the credits roll, I'm like, fuck, they could have done something so awesome after Bride of Chucky and we got that. So, I love the hell out of Bride of Chucky. To me, this is a perfect Chucky movie, a perfect sequel, and it was just barely nudged out by my number one. And I'll tell you why, because number one, Child's Play 2 is not only one of the greatest horror movies of all time, it's one of the greatest horror sequels of all time. And like, I put it right up there next to Bride of Chucky, and I'm telling you, it was so hard for me to decide which one because I love them both so much. And Bride of Chucky, I said, was my favorite for the longest time. But when I was reviewing these movies, you know, I rewatched every single one, preparing my review, kind of calculating my thoughts, figuring out what I wanted to say. And I enjoyed rewatching Child's Play 2 so much that I watched it twice. And most of it is because of that badass, iconic, unprecedented third act. This movie has one of the greatest third acts in any movie ever. Honestly, not just horror movie, any movie ever. It just goes for broke. And it's all of those elements. It's Chucky being fully realized in this movie. It's Chucky having some of his best, if not his best, one-liners, just like I said in Bride, in Child's Play 2. Those movies are in competition for the best Chucky one-liners. This is Chucky fully unleashed, going after Andy, and he is the star of this movie. Even though he is the villain, this is the Chucky movie that they said, you know what? Everybody's coming to see Chucky. Chucky's the star of this one. Put Chucky as much as you possibly can throughout this movie, and this movie is a blast to go through. I love the hell out of this. I mean, every single shot, every single frame, there is nothing in this movie that I could criticize. There was no negatives in my review for this movie, as well as Bride of Chucky. It was just like, this is awesome. Everything about this I'm loving. I'm eating all of it up. There's some great kills, some great iconic moments. I love whenever he kills the chick from Sparkle Motion and everything from Donnie Darko. He just spanks her to death with a fucking yardstick. You got Alex Vincent doing much better in his role as Andy. I mean, he's still not an Oscar winner or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but he's much better in this than he was in Child's Play 1. I like kind of the creepy house aspect, which is similar to Curse of Chucky, of this foster house. It's just really off and weird and off-putting, especially the foster parents, where you got the mom who is so nurturing. She's the girl from American Werewolf in London, and then you get the foster father who just seems like the most intolerant asshole. Man, how's it hanging, Phil? Gotta love that. Everything about this movie, honestly. The third act is what honestly just give it that slight little nudge to put it onto number one for me, because just everything about this ramps up from the beginning. As soon as this starts, the movie just keeps going and keeps going and keeps ramping up and going up and ratcheting up the tension and your excitement, and you're on the edge of your seat all the way until the final frame and that final confrontation that is just one of the coolest third acts ever in that Play Toys factory. I mean, Chucky goes through hell. He is looking to kill Andy and Kyle no matter what stands in his way. He loses his arm, fine, I'll stick a knife on there. He loses his legs, fine, I'll ride around on this little board with wheels. He gets molten plastic thrown on him, and he's still coming after him. It is awesome. And now that I mentioned Kyle, that's another big positive. Kyle is probably one of the coolest side characters, if not the coolest side character in this entire franchise, as far as our good guys and our protagonists. She's a really good counterpoint for Andy as somebody who feels kind of abandoned, like nobody really cares for her, and she has to look out for herself. She's a survivor, she's a fighter. All the things that you want to see as kind of like a mentor and a protector for Andy. She doesn't detract away from Andy, she just adds to it. So, I mean, I could go on all day long. You can see my full review for Child's Play 2 and have me just gush about that for another 15 minutes, but I had to put Child's Play 2 at number one. I've had Bride at my number one for the longest time, but Child's Play 2 revisiting it, I'm just like, this is a classic. This is a movie that, if I could only take one Child's Play movie to a desert island with me, I mean, I'd be kicking and screaming that I couldn't take Child's Play 2 and Bride of Chucky, and I'd be begging and pleading, but I think I would end up picking Child's Play 2 because of that badass third act and just how awesome Chucky is, just how fully realized, unleashed and 150% crazy Chucky is in this movie. So that's my number one. That is my favorite Child's Play movie, Child's Play 2. Well, that's it, guys. That is my ranking of the Child's Play franchise. I have had so much fun going through this franchise again, reviewing each film, analyzing it, giving my rating for each one, and ending on a ranking video. It's such an awesome feeling of achievement to finish a franchise, and this is up there with Nightmare on Elm Street as my favorite franchise in horror or in movie history. Honestly, I'm a Chucky fanatic, so it's a little bittersweet that I'm done with Chucky. Maybe in a few years I'll do revisited reviews or something just to kind of recapture that Child's Play craziness. But put your rankings down below, guys. Do you agree with mine or do you have something wildly different? Speaking of wildly different, go over to Drum Dums, check out his crazy ass ranking because I'm sure his casual Chucky self has something wildly different than this one. Maybe. If we have the same ranking, I'm going to be extremely upset. So go over to Drum Dums, check out his ranking, put in his comment section that Cody sent you, and whether or not you agree more with his ranking or my ranking, just have a little friendly competition amongst friends here. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Please look down below for my social media links. I got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter down below, and the link to my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, to help support it, to help it grow, but also get exclusive content for your eyes only. And on that note, I'm actually spending the entire month of November doing Patreon requests. So that's another cool little perk you can get for being a patron of mine and supporting this channel. But if you don't want to do that, no problem whatsoever. If you want to check out some more of these videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.